Hey, it's Kat in Toulouse, and welcome back to Beyond What's Said, where we uncover the hidden dynamics behind communication, confidence, and how we connect with each other.
And that is right. Today we're going to explore EQ, emotional intelligence, what it is, but specifically how it applies to leadership and how it's often a critical, underlooked part of making the transition to your next big role or accomplishing that really big thing that you're aiming for.
That's right. And so make sure you download our episode, like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and let's get right into it.
Let's get into it. Coming at you live from...
Oh, yeah. If you haven't noticed, our background has changed a little bit.
Yeah.
We're not from the corner of our litter boxes. We are here in the backyard of Montreal.
Yeah, my childhood home up in the West Island. And no, it feels great to be back home. You said, not the litter box, but technically.
This is just a giant litter box of like squirrels and birds and bees and
exactly insects. No, I mean it's it's a beautiful garden. You can't see most of it other than this little backdrop here, which is beautiful in and of itself. But no, this is my childhood home, and my mom's done like a phenomenal job keeping up with everything. It's a great space to reset as we take some time off from the usual grind.
All right. So as we were saying, this came up, when we had this, actually, we were just in Toronto visiting your brother, and we had this conversation with him just over some beers and stuff. And he said something really interesting that I thought, hey, we need to bring this to our audience because they need to hear that.
Yeah. So we're talking about his trajectory, right? My brother started out as a scientist, wanting to do research, and eventually made the sort of transition from science to business. And obviously, he made his way up through the ranks after completing his MBA. And now he's obviously in a leadership position, has been for quite some time. And I think what he was saying, the gist of it is most of the key advancements he made in his career had little to do with this linear point A to point B. It was actually a lot of gray areas where he showed his ability to connect the dots, not on a skill level, but on a people to people level, like being able to bring people together, lead people, have emotional intelligence aptitudes for him. He was like, yeah, that was the critical thing. Skills matter. Like obviously he needs to get in the room, but then changing rooms, so to speak, is more than just, the skills you bring to the table.
No, absolutely. I think like nowadays we're being sold, not even nowadays, I think even when we were kids and the generation before that and all. So we were always kind of taught you just need to pick a skill, a hard skill. Most of the time it's hard skill like coding, engineering, like teaching or, like
teaching history.
or exactly. Like
no
research,
offense,
research skills, right?
Absolutely.
And there's not as much emphasis on the softer skills. And I'm not just talking about soft skills as in how to present yourself. I know what I talk about a lot in my workshops, like presentation and public speaking and all that stuff. That's kind of borderline, still a bit of a hard skill because it's performative.
Yes.
What I found really interesting from our conversation with your brother is that the higher you go, you think that you need to stack on more of these hard skills to showcase to those above you that, hey, look at how capable I am.
Yeah.
So therefore, you should promote me.
Yeah.
Because in fact, he actually said the higher you go, this is what I really like, that what he said was the higher you go, the more people skills or the more emotional intelligence you need in order to get there.
Yeah. What's funny is he said this and it reminded me of my own role in education. As much as there has been such a push for holistic education of training up students to become not just competent future engineers or computer programmers or architects. No, it's really about making them into competent human beings with these empathetic qualities, the ability to bring people together, build consensus, right? And whether it's in any kind of competitive program like the IB, for example, with the approaches to learning and all of the components outside of the traditional subject-specific classes, CL, which is, big in many curriculums, it still feels like the in-between. It's like we have
like
a bunch...
an add-on.
Like it's an add-on. We are supposed to develop those holistic approaches within the context of, say, an English class where you're learning to decipher a text and take on the perspective of a character that you're reading about, or history where we contextualize events and we look at the sort of the the deep background of something to gain that broader perspective. Or psychology, where I have to teach about emotional regulation and stress and how to anchor yourself as a growing, budding teen, right? So all of that is possible within the context of each class that's in a larger curriculum, but it still feels like, yeah, in between we do SEL specific stuff. And as part of your immersion in any kind of expertise, you'll pick up those emotional intelligence competencies along the way. It's like, well,
I think what you're also kind of pointing out is they're two separate things. Like you learn your business or your whatever. And then there's this thing that we do because it's important to be a holistic person, to be a good person, right?
No, of course.
You need to learn how to do that. But ironically, especially, we have a lot of students who are really into business, but not just our students. I think like across the globe.
Absolutely.
Particularly in Asia, it's all about business, econ. Their classes are always full and things like that. And, but there's not enough emphasis in being like, hey, as part of learning how to run a business, essentially the people component of things is very much intertwined, but it's not really being taught that way.
Yeah. And I think it's not to say that what I do as part of my role as an IB teacher, what many IB teachers do and teachers of other competitive curriculums do, like we're not doing it. It's definitely there. But I feel like the way in which it transfers out of, say, high school and then into university and then into the real world, right? I think because often students are caught up with the rigors of their examinations and having to kind of meet these benchmarks and hit these sort of notes so that they get the sort of competitive resume that they need to access that, whatever it is that they're trying to access. Right. So for me, it's like, it's really difficult, as much as it's baked into so many systems, so many curricular frameworks, and not just curriculum, but just it's part of like everyone's intuitive general understanding of life. It's like, well, no, you need people skills. Don't be just book smarts. You got to be street smarts. You hear that all the time. But it's like, how do we cultivate that and sustain that and make that like something that is consistent from your younger years all the way into your professional life? And I think that what my brother was trying to get at is, it would have been helpful to have this awareness a long time ago when he was starting out. So it's kind of like this after the fact realization, like, oh yeah.
But nowadays, it's, what he was also kind of expressing is that he thinks about his kids and also this generation, especially post-COVID, this kind of lack of interpersonal ability, skill to communicate clearly and to not just communicate clearly on like what I want and what's in it for me, but also to think beyond the self and to be like, what can I contribute to the room, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I mean, for added context, my brother's Gen X, I guess like tail end of Gen X. We're millennials. And so I think it's funny that the book Emotional Intelligence, which Daniel Goleman popularized ages ago, that was from like the early 1990s. So obviously that conversation was like just beginning as my brother was making his way out of high school or kind of in the midst of high school, right? And us millennials, I think we were part of that last push where baby boomers, they promised us that linearity, that just like get the right degrees and the right opportunities will come. And then, for Gen Z, it's a whole different struggle. That's a messy economy post 2008. And also like, you talk about interpersonal connection. This is Gen Z especially had a formative part of their years, at least younger Gen Z, taken away from them because of COVID. So picking up on those emotional nuances, those situational nuances, it's like, I know I was in front of a screen when I should have been in a physical classroom.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. It's just like when we say these, it's never a judgment to like the generations now. It's like, you guys suck. No, it's like it's circumstantial. And when we take advice from previous generations, you do kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. You do need to take what's good and useful and, and then adapt it to what is relevant to your current situation.
No, absolutely.
But I do think generational gaps aside, I do think that communication nowadays is even more prominent. You see it pop up here and there, talking about the importance of being able to communicate clearly, to be able to differentiate yourself in the age of AI when everyone's using AI to write things. It's like, how do you sound different? How do you communicate your values? How do you communicate your thoughts? How do you take a stance on something, like, so that not everyone's just saying that resonates really well?
That landed really. No, I think it's funny. I just had this thought. It's like, why are we even in this kind of communication world to begin with now, doing this podcast and leaning in on that trend, if you want to call it that. So for example, Jefferson Fisher, really important figure in the communication world. And
well, he's a trial attorney.
Who started out obviously sort of in his car doing these short reels, and now it's turned into a whole podcast.
He has a beautiful accent. He's from Texas.
Very charming, absolutely. Book, a really successful book, The Next Conversation. All of the above, like just this kind of pathway from obscure kind of person on Instagram to being one of the Times top 100 content creators.
That's
right? So I'm using him as an example of, there's a genuine craving or desire right now within the larger public to learn tips and tricks or deeper frameworks about how to talk with people, how to interact with people, how to pick up on anything from body language to emotional cues, how to deal with uncomfortable bosses or personal attacks. Like, how do you regulate yourself in these more tense moments, right? So this is all over the map right now, whether Instagram, LinkedIn, and other platforms. So the context is, there's a desire to optimize the way we relate to the people around us right now. And I mean, like, the deeper question is, why is that? Why now? I think AI is definitely a big driver here, because so much of us can sound like experts, or we can list very similar qualifications or abilities.
Or everything can be reframed into something that sounds really cool,
Yeah.
I think in the past we would just be like, I can cook scrambled eggs really well. And now it's just like the expert of
culinary artisan. I'm an architect of the taste buds.
Architect of the taste buds. See, this is where AI would help us come up with some bullshit.
We'll come up with a nice long list for you guys and put it in the comments, or maybe not.
Going back to what you said earlier, you like, so how do you deal with like a, difficult boss, or how do you have difficult conversation, things like that. Going back to our original opener, which is leadership. Emotional intelligence and leadership. I think it's like, how do you be an effective and influential, impactful leader using emotional intelligence, using these kind of communication skills, so that the people that you lead don't feel like you're that difficult boss that I have to deal with, that you are genuinely there to listen. It's interesting because literally this morning, I got one of the newsletters from Jefferson Fisher, and it talked about how do you give a difficult performance review at work?
Yeah, wow.
It talks about honesty doesn't always mean making the other person feel good or like they don't feel attacked. Honesty sometimes is caring if you can lay it out very clearly and that there's no ambiguity. I think trust is not broken because you weren't nice enough.
Exactly,
trust is broken by surprise.
Yeah, when you are showing a sudden facade that completely betrays the person's like expectations.
Well, that's it. Like, how many times have I experienced in a workplace situation with colleagues or in a relationship where they would say one thing and then you later on found out something, like they were actually saying something else, or they're doing something behind your back. That's when your trust really breaks, not because they said something direct to you that's seemingly a bit rude or abrasive at the time.
Yeah. I think what you're sort of saying is, in any sort of workplace situation or even relationship situation, this is something you say all the time: keep the thing the thing.
Keep the thing the thing.
I mean, it's a thing that people say, but I feel you say this time and time again when we have our relationship moments where we fight, have conflict.
Hey, we fight. Couples fight is normal.
It's exactly. But I do think that some core emotional intelligence component here is the ability to, in the moment, realize that, hey, this conversation is going to trigger all sorts of anger, all sorts of discomfort. I'm going to be like really nasty towards you, or you might be really nasty towards me, or at least it might feel that way. But actually, we're having a conversation about a matter. Like, imagine there's a thing in between us, and you can kind of put a fence around it and be like, this is the thing. We're talking about this right now. We're not going to personally attack each other. Tensions might boil, they might simmer, but we're going to focus on this thing right here.
Yeah.
And we're not going to personalize. We're not going to make it about, well, this thing is a reflection of your inherent flaw as a
exactly
whatever, right? And I think this is classic from the work of Gottman, the Gottman Institute, famous for the study of healthy romantic relationships. But this is like one of the core things that you see in this research time and time again, is that if you can like actually like keep the thing and not get personal and not let it escalate into like, well, you never do the dishes because you're a failure.
Or
and
like, remember that time when you...
And it's just this escalation, this kind of giant snowball that rolls down the hill of mounting grievances, right? So yeah, that ability to keep the thing and to, hey, right now we're talking about your performance, not your character, not you as a person.
And I think stating that upfront,
yes.
It does lower the defense of the person, because like when a leader or someone above you calls you in for a meeting, you're going to feel a bit of that power dynamic, right? It's just natural. It's not right or wrong. It just is, and so when a leader can be like, hey, we're going to talk about this, and I'm going to address this thing that we're going to talk about. And it might feel a little uncomfortable here and there, just state it out so that the person is prepared. Okay, this is the thing we're talking about. Now, the problem then becomes if you start venturing off to all the other things that you really wanted to talk about, but you didn't address up front.
Exactly,
and then whoever's sitting in front of you is going to feel like, whoa, wait, what is this really about? But then they don't feel comfortable asking you that, because again, there's that power dynamic that is just there.
So it's like, I guess probably one of the most obvious fixes or basic ways to disarm this. And I've seen this in different texts. It's like, instead of like sending out that email or, letting that phone call, I need to talk to you about something. We need to talk. It's just like, all right, about what? So I think that that kind of radical transparency about what matters are being discussed, when and how, like just setting that scene so that people's predictions about the reality that they're about to experience is actually consistent with, because if you have, first of all, if you leave the person hanging with like all sorts of doubt and uncertainty, like talk about what, that's just going to drive anxiety levels and jack up cortisol. Or if you just keep it very casual and like, let's just have a conversation about.
Well, that's the thing. Is I think what you're trying to say is that the tone and the delivery needs to match the scale of what you're trying to say. Again, keeping the thing, it needs to match. Which this again ties to what we said about trust. It's like if there's discrepancy there, it's hard to build trust. So if someone were to be like, there's something super important and very urgent that needs to be addressed, I need to see you right now. And you go in there, just like, did you want coffee? Or,
the coffee machine needs more thorough cleaning.
So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I think it would drive up unnecessary anxiety and cortisol. And I think over time it diminishes, kind of like the boy who cried wolf. It's like over time it kind of diminishes, like, oh, is it really urgent, or is it just another one of those whims that my boss wants kind of thing? And then on the contrary, if you're always just like, oh, don't worry about it, we're just going to have a chat. But every time we go in, it ends up being this like really heavy conversation.
Sort of existential
and then,
firefight.
Exactly. Then it causes a lot of confusion.
No, absolutely.
And so as a good leader, having that emotional intelligence, twofold. One is to kind of regulate your own emotion, to be like, all right, I'm keeping the thing. What is it that I'm actually here to do? What is the objective? And what is the goal that we're trying to mutually get to? Let's keep the thing. And then also reading the person, the room, or the team that you're leading, to be like, all right, what does my team need right now? What do they need from me? Is it actual like material support? Is it emotional support? Is it knowledge, resource support? Right?
Well, I think that's, having that contextual situational awareness of what sort of conversation are we entering? What are going to be the ramifications? What is this about? Kind of setting the scene, right? That would be like the number one thing. And I think the number two thing that you're talking about is perspective taking. Like being able to figure out that the people you are either leading or the people you're about to interact with may be in vulnerable states.
That's right.
They might be stressed out from a terrible night's sleep, family situations, and just the general weight of the day-to-day grind. And that will put their performance in a compromised state. They won't be as sharp cognitively. They might not be the fastest and the most effective at what they need to do, right? So like having the ability to demand certain things and we hit these performance benchmarks, but having the grace, knowing that like, okay, people are coming at it from different contexts.
Well, I think that's the tricky balance that a leader needs to strike, and that shows who has higher emotional intelligence over others, right? So finding that balance between, hey, I'm empathetical, I am understanding, but not letting that be like, oh, now we can't do anything because I have to care for every single person. Everyone becomes paralyzed.
Yeah, exactly.
Or on the contrary, being like, I don't care. Just get the thing done. I want results, right? So that's kind of like the two ends of a spectrum. And so a good leader would be able to find that balance in between, and kind of ties back to what we were saying earlier, is just that honesty is sometimes is what is needed. It's not always about making everyone feel good or feel supported at all times. It's sometimes being like, hey, I see what you're doing, or I feel what you're feeling, but I really need to get this done. How can I help you?
Well, exactly. Like without the honesty, if you don't create the conditions for people to be honest and transparent with you because you're not being very honest or transparent with them, or you're just being kind of unpredictable and moody, for lack of a better word, then you can't figure out what your team's strengths and weaknesses are.
That's right.
Like, okay, well, all right, now this person is being open and vulnerable about their inability to meet this particular important deadline. So where can we recalibrate so that person can meet the deadline, or how can we delegate, right? So it's without the honesty, there's no way you can realistically gauge people's skills and ceiling for where they're at in terms of performance.
And that goes back to the more internal side of emotional intelligence, is that if a leader cannot start with themselves to be like, all right, what is it that I need? What am I about? And can I control my emotions? Can I identify the gaps that are within my own behavior or actions or thinking? Then how can you do that for other people? You know, it's like, if you can't, say the leader can't regulate their own emotions, on one day when they're feeling good, they're going to be like, hey, everyone's good, right? Yeah, I'm the best boss ever. And then next day when you're having a hard time, you're going to be like, I just want this done. I want to see this done. You're doing shit job. And so
exactly.
Then what does that kind of reflect? How do you actually lead a team when you're so finicky? And so it really does. A leader, we always say like a leader, not we, it's a universal thing. You see that in motivation posters and like different carousels, is that a good leader is one that is at the front, demonstrating and modeling and doing the work, not the one in the back with the whip trying to tell people what to do. And that starts with their own emotional intelligence as well.
Well, because you yourself as a leader, if you're going to be leading and if you're going to be at the front of the pack rather than just bossing people around from behind or something, that also entails vulnerability. It also entails showing your mortality, if you will, like that you're not perfect and you're going to make mistakes, and that you yourself sometimes don't have all the answers. You need sometimes time to process information before making an important decision. Like modeling that, it's much like parenting. Athletic coaching, teaching students, leading people in a firm or in any kind of organization, that requires good examples.
And a level of vulnerability, knowing when to apologize or to recognize your own shortcomings and to be okay with being like, hey, I'm not always right and I'm sorry for what I did or what I said. That's the same with parenting, coaching, anything with that power dynamic. Is like, you're never right. And you're never right.
Never
I'm
right.
telling you that right now. No, you're never always right. We can't, it's impossible for us to know everything and to bat 1,000, as Elon Musk would say, you can't bat 1,000.
Yeah, I remember that.
But still, you don't use that as like a crutch either. You don't just go, can't bat 1,000 and just brush it off, right? No, it's genuine apologies, genuine being like, hey, I'm really sorry for hurting you.
No, of course. And I think being able to admit you're wrong and that you were out of line or that you transgressed boundaries of what it means to be a good colleague, to be a good partner, to be a good parent, or that as a teacher, it's like, well, this was maybe a little bit too much and I was perhaps being too demanding or too harsh in terms of the requirements of my classroom.
Yeah.
Those moments are critical because it shows that you are capable of, like, receptive to change,
and
capable of learning from your mistakes.
The irony is that a lot of people think that that will make them look weak.
Yes.
But the reality is that people will actually respect you more.
Yeah. No, and I think so much of the literature on any kind of performance, sport, professional, and otherwise, it's like you want to put yourself and the people that are under you, if you have people under you, and I'm using all sorts of different frameworks here, but it's like you don't want to put them in a fear state where they are operating from the premise of, I can't make mistakes.
That's right.
Or else I lose the job or I get demoted, right? So when people are starting from that back foot, it actually just lowers their performance. It makes them stressed out.
That's right.
It impairs their cognition. And what you want them is to be in a more kind of challenge, growth oriented state, which is, okay, this is a sandbox with, rules and responsibilities and expectations, but there's an ability to exceed yourself in a way that feels safe, in a way that feels, okay, it'll take me a while to get this done and I'm not going to be perfect, but at least there's going to be a healthy sense of I'm growing, like the skill is developing and I'm actually moving the metric, but I'm not doing it because I fear the person above me or I fear the consequences of not, hitting this particular benchmark.
Yeah. And so to wrap up this episode and going back to kind of what your brother was saying, that what he noticed in his climb of the ladder in the corporate world is that the more he showed emotional intelligence, the more him showing that he can lead a team, the more he can show he can manage a task, the higher he was able to climb. And the higher he climbed, the more he realized how he needs even more emotional intelligence. And why is that? Well, because the higher you go, you're not just relying on that hard skill that got you through the door anymore. It's not like you're the best programmer in the team, therefore now you're the boss.
Yeah.
Because once you get up there, you're no longer dealing with just a task, you're dealing with people.
Well, to kind of quote the original emotional intelligence text by Daniel Goleman, he calls emotional intelligence a meta ability, something that allows you to bring all the skills together and access that kind of next level. And I feel like this is kind of what we're talking about, whether it's regulating yourself, being aware of the context of the scene that you're setting, those around you, using language that obviously doesn't put down people, but that still pushes them and challenges them. Being able to empathize, take perspectives, and also,
but also knowing when to be brutally honest, but in the most, like, keeping the thing the thing,
not personalizing, and getting people to have a view of you that is like, oh, this person is going to challenge me, push me, encourage me, keep me honest, keep me accountable. He or she will not just on a whim suddenly change moods and now I'm scared for my life, right?
That's right.
It's not a skill. It's not a single thing. Like, it is like a meta ability to bring both the internal, the external, the interpersonal, to stitch it all together. But the
good thing is that it's learnable.
It is learnable.
Yeah. It's like, even though it's not one skill, it's not like juggling. You just practice a few times and you got it. No, it comes from actively being in the field, being in the rooms, like interacting with people, putting yourself in different situations with different groups of people. And through that practice, with that intention of how do I become more aware or more attuned, or what am I feeling right now? Why does it feel like a ball of fire inside of me? How do I regulate myself? It comes from these little steps, of intentional practice. And thankfully, it's a skill that can be learned. It's not like some people are born with it and others are not. Anyway, perfect timing as it's getting a bit louder. So we'll see you again in another episode. Have a good one.